Today was a day full of anxiety and uncertainty and greasy food. Let's get into it. So I woke up pretty early in the morning and I took my vitamins and brushed my teeth to go back to sleep again. I woke up at around 3:38, 3:40. I actually recorded my update video last night. Yeah, I guess I was just so tired yesterday because I knew that I had a pretty stacked schedule when it came to getting things done, such as my car's check engine light turned on, so I knew I needed to take it to the mechanic early in the morning. I also knew that we still needed to complete doing tiles today. That's a very involved process, and it was just all coming up after like a long day at work. It kind of just hit me like a brick, all of the activity that I knew I needed to do, and I guess my body responded in a very tired way, I guess you could say. Well, even after waking up early and taking my vitamins and brushing my teeth, I went back to sleep again, only to get up at around 6 in the morning because my mom needed me to take out the trash. And I completely blanked out on taking the trash out yesterday because, again, I was really tired and sleepy. So I did just that, backyard trash and the bathroom trashes. Then I went back to sleep again, and I continued to sleep until around 7:30. That's when I knew I needed to take a shower because my face was super hairy and hadn't taken one in like 2 days, so I got started on that, and then I was ready to go. I drove my car over to the mechanic, and he told me that the problem with the car had to do with the purge valve solenoid. Apparently, was because when I got my car fixed a little earlier, new battery and the new starter was a lot of energy for the car to handle, and it needed that specific part replaced so it could handle that sudden change in energy, I believe is what he told me. So that was a good like $133. If I wasn't being careful of what I spent, I'm definitely going to be careful now. Now, as they were working on it, I decided to go to the McDonald's and grab a meal that included 2 sausage egg McMuffins, coffee with vanilla syrup, sugar half in it, and 1 hash brown with some ketchup. Pretty good. As I was eating it, I remember I was watching a Digital Foundry video on the evolution of id Tech and the Doom series, which was very interesting, seeing how that game ran on old technology and how it progressed over the years into something more fleshed out. Very cool. Now, when I got the call from the mechanic and he told me about that problem, he said it would take a little while, and as soon as it was ready to pick up, I'd be ready to pick it up. So I was like, all right, sounds good. So I walked home because it was fairly close by. And when I arrived, I remember my mom wanted to take me shopping to look at tiles with her. I much rather wanted to work on my YouTube video for my channel, the one Brain Jam. Well, Brain Jam Extra anyways. So she allowed me to stay, and then she went off, and then I ended up first spending a little too much time messing around on my Switch, playing a game called Brave, which is pretty good. And then I finally decided to work on my YouTube channel video. In this video, I was basically going through each scene at double speed on DaVinci Resolve, trying to find parts where it took me too long to say information, or I repeated information, or maybe I just said ahs, or it was a little too much. I basically trying to make it as smooth and easy to listen to as I possibly can. As soon as I have a cut that I'm satisfied with, then I'm going to again work on reframing the shots, maybe close-ups of me talking about my process, and then when I show my process, close-ups of that, close-ups of the video I may be watching, things to keep it visually interesting and also show you what's going on. After about an hour of working on that, I was mentally exhausted, so I decided to take a nap. Before I did, though, I did some breathing exercises on my bed, which helped me relax and get into a deeper state of rest. And then, after that, I was told by my family friend that she was getting hungry, and I was getting hungry too. And there was a new Fantastic Four Little Caesars pizza that was available, so we decided to give it a try. At that point, the very moment in time, the car mechanic called and told me that the car was ready to go. So I asked our family friend if she'd be willing to drive me over. She said yes, and so she took me over and dropped me off and asked if I could pick up the pizza after getting dropped off, and I agreed to. So she drove away, not before ordering the pizza online. I went up, I wrote a check for the part that was replaced, and I went in my car, I turned on the ignition, and I was waiting in the driveway looking at the dashboard with all the lights and hoping that the check engine light wouldn't blink. Now, before, when the check engine light blinked, it blinked like at least 10 or 11 times. But when I flipped on the car ignition and waited to see if it would blink, it did indeed blink, but it blinked only 2 times and then stayed solid again. Part of me wonders if it might have just been old electronics inside the car, because it is from 2005, so that might be an explanation for the weird reading. Nonetheless, I wanted to be absolutely sure that I didn't just drop a whole lot of money for a problem that still hadn't been fixed yet. So I called in the mechanic to ask why it was showing that symbol, and he asked his co-mechanic to check in on it for him because he was busy. So he checked in and I told him my exact problem. I turned the dial in. I waited for the lights on the dashboard to pop up, and I waited for the specifically the engine light to see if it would blink again. And once again, it did blink twice as I had the car key turn a little bit. The co-mechanic told me it was nothing to worry about because the car normally shows those indicators from the very get-go, and it's only something to worry about if those indicators show as you're driving the car. So that's the explanation I was given. So I was like, okay. I do remember as I was writing the check, they did swap out my window wiper for free. So that was really cool of them. I really appreciate that, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, the car does seem to run quieter, so I'm sure they did a lot of good work on it, absolutely. That light blinking while having it on, but not turning on the ignition, just having it on, flipping it for a little bit, just had me slightly worried, but I'm sure they know what they're doing and they wouldn't have any malintent. I do trust these mechanics a lot. So, but it is your money, so you do tend to be cautious about those things. But anyways, yeah, so I drove over to the Little Caesars. I picked up the Fantastic Four pizza, which also included some crazy bread. Then I drove back to the house. I ate the lunch with our family friend with the marinara sauce, and it was quite good. And then I decided to take a nap. But before taking a nap, I decided to do some deep dive research on my phone on various topics, including remote viewing. And there's this guy on YouTube called The Sneezing Monkey who that's his online alias. And he really likes to find people who proclaim themselves as being UFO experts and then debunking their evidence or their claims. And I do get a kick out of watching that because it's just as good to have healthy skepticism as it is to have an open mind. Because, if you're one way or the other, you shut yourself off from every possibility, and the other one, you don't know how to say no. So you need to find that balance. Anyways, my sister arrived, and when she arrived, it was cool to greet her, but then, so I got out of my bed and I greeted her, hugged her, and she said, "You can continue to relax. I'm just going to clean up the kitchen a little bit." It was like, all right. So I went back and chillaxed while watching a video from a YouTube channel called Farsight where they're trying to remote view Mars. Those videos are kind of hard to get into because it's basically people just making vague recollections what they think they've seen through their remote viewing sessions, and it's honestly really difficult to get into for sure. But I really should have just taken a nap, but I didn't. Yeah. Then my mom arrived and she wanted me to help out with the tiles, which of course I did, but I wanted to clear the back room of tiles by stacking the ones that were already layered and coated with, what's that stuff called again? That sealant, yeah. So I spent my time in the back room picking up the sealant and stacking it and putting in corners. It's fine when it's one tile, but when you start stacking them, it starts getting heavier and heavier. So it does slow down the process. It didn't help too that I was also listening to a guy recount his alien encounter story on my phone as I was, lifting these tiles and putting them away. I guess I like not being bored while I'm working, I guess. But I was putting some of these tiles in a wooden wardrobe, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't putting too many in there out of fear that I might have, put too much weight in the wardrobe and it ends up breaking and ruining the tiles, which would not have been good. So as soon as I started hearing a slight crack, I took the tiles off that I was going to put on them and then started stacking them on the floor instead. My sister was getting a bit flustered of me not doing the job quickly, and I could have done it much quicker, but again I was distracted by the whole silly story on my phone being told, so I really should have had more of my attention on what I was doing rather than splitting my attention. So she showed me how she stacks them really fast and I just followed her lead and we got it done pretty quickly. Then after that we put sealant on the current batch of tiles that were being worked on that my sister and mom had dusted and sealed or laid out on the floor. And I almost forgot. My sister wanted me to make an AI generated video of her jumping on a board that was slightly contorted so it looks like a trampoline. And she wanted me to have her jump on the board, then jump up in the sky and do a backflip and land on the house. And so I did do that, and it was a pretty funny video. Not gonna lie. After we did our first coating, I wanted to get my car's gas refilled because my car had a low gas sign turn on, so I knew it was time. So I filled it with gas. When I arrived at the gas station, I decided to do it in the store instead of the kiosk because I've heard horror stories of people who tried buying gas outside in the kiosk and their information was stolen. So, when it comes to that kind of stuff, I like to be better safe than sorry. So I went into the building and I got my business done there. It was a pretty long line though, but luckily I was next up. And I remember the guy in front of me, he was getting lotto tickets and he wanted the cashier, who was like this man who, just wanted to be done for the day, to get involved by saying, "Hey, pick a number, 12, 13, or 15. Come on, pick a number." He said, "No, I don't want to. He's like, "Come on." It's like, "No, no, no." He's like, "Yeah, please pick a number." He's like, "Okay, fine, 15. He's like, "Okay, cool, awesome." I think it was his attempt at trying to be like friendly, but it just, I don't know. I guess the guy just wasn't into it, or maybe he thought it was annoying, or any number of reasons. When they were done with their business and I walked up, I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And he said, "Good. Are you going to buy something?" He was like, "Okay." I guess he's done for the day. I was like, "Yes, please. I'd like to get my gas refilled." So paid for it and filled it up. Problem with the gas, though, was that when I put it in, the little nozzle with the lever wasn't responding to my inputs, which was quite annoying and a little concerning, considering I just put money in there. And also, I drove very cautiously to the gas station because my car had that low on gas sign on it. I was worried my car would stop riding in a second. I'd have to find someone to help me push her or whatever, which would not have been good. But luckily I did arrive, but the again, the nozzle was giving me trouble. I was able to get all of the gas that I paid for out, but I constantly had to like slightly lift it, and then it like would always like cling down, and I'd have to slightly lift it again. You have to get at that Goldilocks point where it's like not too high and right in the middle. It's really annoying. But it was done. And then I drove back home, and when I arrived, we had cut watermelon and mango waiting for us, courtesy of my sister, which was very awesome of her. But before we could enjoy that, and before we could enjoy watching a conspiracy video from based on a man called David Icke, I believe, instead it was then time to give the tiles one more coat. So we were doing that, and we tried to use the spray-on pump tool, but that spray-on pump tool wasn't really working so well, and it ended up just spitting things, sealant out in a stream instead of a spray, which was not ideal at all. So we had to get the rest of the sealant, put our rags in, and then wipe the rest into the remaining sealants that we were working on. And at around that time, our family friend had arrived with KFC. So we all gathered around the table and we got ourselves some KFC. We had to split the mashed potatoes and gravy very sparingly because my mom couldn't eat chicken right now because she recently got her tooth worked on and she doesn't want to eat any too tough to eat food like chicken with bone in it. So she got most of the potatoes and gravy. I had 3 pieces of chicken, original recipe, which was quite good, and a dollop of mashed potatoes and gravy, and a biscuit. My mom got 2 biscuits, and she asked me if I wanted half of hers. I said yeah, but then I was talked down to by my sister and family friend telling me to let her have all of it because she didn't have chicken, so she should eat the rest. I was like, okay. I mean, she offered, but okay. So she compensated me by giving me a tiny little piece of biscuit, and then I ate that. So there you go. But of course, it was fair for my mom to eat all that. I was just being greedy. Alrighty. Then we watched the David Icke documentary released on the YouTube channel. What was it called again? Vice. Yeah, it was called Vice. The one where they hire a bunch of hipster wannabes pretending to be all dark and edgy, or like, look at how counterculture I am. Aren't I cool? I guess it's their brand, which is fine. But it seems really obvious, You'd want to be a little more subtle, but I guess they really like making it known, like no stone unturned. But anyways, we watched the David Icke documentary, and well, yeah, some crazy stuff. He thinks the moon is hollow. He thinks that the entire world's being ran by reptilians controlling politicians. It's really interesting stuff. Apparently, the guy thought he was like Jesus back in like 1991 or something like that. Crazy stuff. But it was pretty interesting, I'll admit that. Then my sister needed to leave. Me and my mom had to put the finished tiles away in the back room so the weather wouldn't damage them, and also they wouldn't get stolen, or yeah. And once those were put away, I decided to brush my teeth, take my vitamins, and I'm gonna go to bed. Of course, my mom wanted my opinion on the tiles that she bought and whether they were worth it or not. I said they're pretty cool, and then I went on to record this. So that's pretty much the day in a nutshell. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.